Hola, soy Peter Jennings. Sean bienvenidos a este programa especial en The Century, America's Time. La Segunda Guerra Mundial no se peleó en tierra estadounidense, pero, aún así, transformó la sociedad del país. Veremos entonces el Frente Civil estadounidense de 1941 a 1945. El primer domingo de diciembre de 1941, los estadounidenses cumplían con su rutina acostumbrada de los domingos.
I'd been to see another string of interminable westerns at the Plaza, which we went every Saturday and Sunday, and Guns of the Pecos was the movie that was playing.
My father and I were in the living room listening to the Giants football game. My father was sitting next to me suddenly when they announced that Pearl Harbor was attacked.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor by air.
I came home to a household that was somber and quiet, and the radio was on, and was told that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, which I had no idea where it was. I'll tell you what struck my mind. I thought it was somewhere in Oregon.
Pronto todos los estadounidenses supieron que más de 2,000 de sus compatriotas habían muerto en el ataque japonés a Pearl Harbor, en Hawái, y que casi la mitad de la flota norteamericana había sido destruida.
Well, it was absolute horror. People were just shocked. When it happens, you don't know what to think. You're just standing there wondering what happens now.
And it was terrifying. We sat down and looked at each other for a couple of minutes, and Max said, "No more civilian clothes." It was a very bad time.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
El presidente Roosevelt anunció a un país sorprendido en su aislamiento e inocencia que para ganar la guerra cada hombre, mujer y niño debía tomar parte en la lucha.
Never before have we been called upon for such a prodigious effort. Never before have we had so little time in which to do so much.
Quizás nos olvidemos a finales de siglo que Estados Unidos en los 40 distaba de ser una superpotencia. Su ejército era el número 19 del mundo, detrás de Holanda y Portugal. Su industria aún estaba sumida en una honda depresión. La guerra, por cierto, cambiaría esas y otras cosas también. Uniría al país en una manera nunca vista antes o después. Para comprender el frente civil en la guerra, se debe entender la época misma, una época tan ingenua que muchos ignoraban que su presidente no podía caminar, una época anterior a la televisión y a las transmisiones por satélite, cuando las noticias de guerra tardaban días o semanas en llegar a los periódicos y al cine. La supervivencia de la democracia no estaba asegurada de ningún modo.
I am the innocent Boulevard.
Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor by air.
Ask not what your country can do.
Kennedy has been shot.
One small step for man.
These truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The Century, America's Time.
as a young boy, fear of the Japanese, that submarines were going to come up in Santa Monica, and, you know, there was a lot of fear then.
Solo 4 días luego del ataque japonés a Pearl Harbor, la Alemania nazi y la Italia fascista le declararon la guerra a Estados Unidos.
The world was a very dark place. The German U-boats were sinking tankers right off the coast of Florida and New Jersey, within sight of bathers on the beach.
Los océanos que habían mantenido a Estados Unidos invulnerable habían sido invadidos por enemigos tanto en el este como el oeste.
We had to destroy those people to save ourselves and to save the United States. Then we all rushed off to the recruiting stations. Everybody I knew who was my age or close to it was in the services. If you were brave, you were in the Marine Corps. Everybody was in one thing or another, and almost all of us were in the Army. The Axis had to be defeated, and we knew that nobody was going to do it except us.
Yeah, my father went to war, and he was managed a little grocery store, IGA grocery store, and he went to Springfield, Missouri to go through basic training.
Voluntarios y reclutados dejaron sus identidades civiles en campos de entrenamiento básico que unieron a tenderos de Kansas con mecánicos de Monterrey y contadores de Brooklyn. En 6 meses, muchos serían enviados a campos de batalla en todo el mundo, dejando atrás a padres, esposas e hijos.
I really adored my father. I mean, it was a, you know, I admired him, I loved him. He was a wonderful father. And, you know, the thought of life without him was, you know, unimaginable to me. It was sort of the hand one was dealt, and your father was going to war in a good cause. And I was very proud of him.
We got married, and then he enlisted. His goal was to be a pilot on a B-24, and he achieved it. He was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant. He got his wings the same week his son was born. We were all taught when your husband becomes an officer, you're an officer's wife. And you do not show any emotions when they go overseas. You hold it back no matter what. No crying. And we did that. It was tough, but we did it.
Las Fuerzas Armadas estadounidenses crecerían de un ejército de 300.000 efectivos en 1940 a 15 millones. Al principio de la guerra había considerables dudas de que estos ciudadanos, soldados rápidamente instruidos, pudiesen hacer frente al bien entrenado y equipado enemigo. Las noticias del frente no eran buenas. 3 meses después de Pearl Harbor, los japoneses infligieron una serie de humillantes derrotas a un país cuya confianza se tambaleaba. El 23 de febrero de 1942, el presidente intentó calmar y unir a una nación asustada.
This is war. The American people want to know and will be told the general trend of how the war is going.
El presidente pidió que la gente siguiera su discurso con un mapa.
I had huge maps on my wall from the backs of newspapers. I marked it with crayon, and I remember putting arrows and X's and circling towns.
We Americans have been compelled to yield ground, but we will regain it.
I remember his confidence and the tone of his voice and the closeness that you felt to him. He was a beacon of light.
Oh boy, when he came on the radio.
Soon, we and not our enemies will have the offensive. We, not they, will win the final battle.
He had the capacity of moving us with words, of inspiring the country, of lifting the country to do more than it might do otherwise.
There is one thought for us here at home to keep uppermost: the fulfillment of our special task of production. Uninterrupted production.
So make your mind up when you get out of bed. Work your head off so you can keep your head. Don't trust.
Las películas del gobierno hicieron ver el hecho de que Estados Unidos no solo debía enviar suministros a sus tropas, sino también a las de sus aliados. Los trabajadores en ciudades de todo el país respondieron.
During the war at night, the mills would be going full blast, and the sky would pulse red with the blast furnaces going off. And we were told at school, and we heard on the radio and saw in the newspapers that Pittsburgh was helping to win the war.
En Detroit, tomó solo 9 meses convertir toda la capacidad de la industria automotriz para la producción de equipo de guerra.
They dubbed Detroit as the arsenal of democracy. The plants operated 24 hours a day, around the clock. You had bombers coming off the line every 5 minutes. Work till they almost fall out, then somebody take your place. I was working on the Jeeps. We sprayed the Jeeps with this olive paint. Can you imagine working 18 and 24 hours a day, staying in the shop? You run home and look at your family and run back to the shop again.
Con la fuerza de trabajo existente llevada hasta el límite, hubo otro grupo de trabajadores listos para contribuir.
Factory owners were very reluctant to hire women. They argued they'll never learn how to operate these complex machines, and if they come onto the assembly line, they'll distract the men. Productivity will go way down, and besides, they shouldn't leave their homes. It'll be the end of the home and the family. But then by about 1942 or 1943, when so many men were in the armed forces, they had to turn to women. So suddenly the whole attitude toward women coming to work changed.
Entre 1940 y 1944, el número de mujeres empleadas en las industrias relacionadas con la guerra se incrementó en un 460% hasta llegar a 19 millones, la tercera parte de la fuerza de trabajo civil. La mitad de estas mujeres eran esposas y madres que nunca habían trabajado antes.
My mother was a nice lady who baked and cooked and cleaned house and whacked her kids around to make sure they stayed in line, and suddenly, she's running a machine at an aircraft factory. She felt she needed to do something.
I think there was an underlying, unexpressed kind of patriotism, not the kind that waves flags, but it was the kind that loved our lives, that loved our country, and we all worked for one reason, to get those airplanes in the sky.
En la planta de Boeing de Seattle, la mitad de los trabajadores eran mujeres. En solo 4 años produjeron más de 12,000 bombarderos B-17.
They call it the Flying Fortress. Most awesome plane. Oh, what a feeling of accomplishment. Even if you only did the riveting on part of it, they couldn't have done it without you.
I became an ABS welder, top of the line. I wore a leather suit. I had a helmet with glasses through it. I pulled this down. I could see through the glass in the helmet. I had a acetylene torch to join pieces of steel together. I was determined that I was going to build ships to show Japan that we would hit back.
Gracias en parte a estas mujeres trabajadoras, las fábricas de Estados Unidos producían 4,000 tanques y 4,500 aviones por mes. Y barcos que tomaban un año en ensamblarse se completaban en 17 días. Las expectativas de producción no solo se alcanzaron, sino que se sobrepasaron. Los años de guerra en el hogar, según la primera dama Eleanor Roosevelt, no eran tiempos ordinarios, ni tiempo para sopesar nada, excepto lo que podemos hacer por el país. Más allá de los sacrificios que hacían todos los estadounidenses, el resultado social de la demanda de hombres y materiales cambiaría al país para siempre. Con la familia estadounidense así reestructurada, las madres dejarían el hogar y sus niños para trabajar en las líneas de ensamblaje.
There was this thing called the war effort, and it took on a life of its own. And you had to be doing something for the war effort.
Lights out up there!
My father was an air raid warden, and when Patrick Joseph Shine said on Leicester Street in his rich Irish tenor voice, "Lights out," the damn lights went out all over the neighborhood.
Name, please. Bud Abbott. That spells mine. You don't understand.
Las estrellas de Hollywood hicieron su parte ayudando a la venta de bonos de guerra.
Defense bond. You're saving your money by lending it to Uncle Sam. See, Uncle Sam needs that money to build ships and planes, tanks. And what? Tanks. You're welcome.
Virtualmente todos harían algo por la causa. Por lo menos significaba adaptarse al racionamiento de cosas que antes se daban por sentado.
There was gas rationing, and you had either A stickers or B stickers or C stickers, which you put in the windshield of your car, and it told how much gas you were allowed.
Cut the use of your car. Save its tires by driving slowly and by driving less.
El presidente apeló a un sentimiento nacional de sacrificio colectivo, según el cual los estadounidenses no solo dejarían de utilizar, sino también se dedicarían a recolectar materiales de guerra.
Turn in all the old rubber anywhere and everywhere.
People sent in their rubber toys from their dogs that had died with a letter saying this was Snuffy's favorite toy and please contribute to the rubber scrap dog. Women cut up their girdles and sent them to Roosevelt personally. Kids would gather up the rubber, gather up the aluminum.
There were kids' memories collecting tin foil. Everybody felt that what they did mattered. And that just was as I reflect back on it, of just inestimable importance.
También lo fueron los noticieros y propaganda que unieron al Frente Civil en su odio contra el enemigo.
And I remember going and seeing the newsreels, you know, cock-a-doodle-doo, and there you were in the war. I saw it all, you know, invasion of Europe and Africa.
You could go there and watch 2.5 hours of newsreels, and it was wonderful. It was all bombs and shells. We were immersed in it. You had to hate the enemy. I mean, the Germans were despicable. The Japanese were indefensibly horrible.
For the soldiers of Japan, who tossed Chinese babies on their bayonets, slaughtered the Chinese people.
We knew that unless we were vigilant, it could happen to us.
For these men who would be committing these same crimes today in San Francisco, Chicago, or any town.
I was 10 years old. To me, a Jap was a Jap, and the only good one was dead. And I suspect that I pretty well reflected most people in this country in the response to the depiction of the Japanese. The American government's portrayal of the Japanese was as if they were cockroaches, monkeys, beasts, subhuman.
El miedo y odio por los japoneses provocado por el ataque a Pearl Harbor tuvo efectos drásticos para los estadounidenses de origen japonés.
Notices were posted on the telephone poles saying that all persons of Japanese ancestry were to be removed by such and such a date. It was a sickening feeling. We were quaking in our boots, not knowing what was going to happen to us.
Lo que sucedió fue la orden ejecutiva 9066, la cual dictaba que todos los japoneses en Estados Unidos fuesen sacados de la costa oeste, donde se temía que ayudaran a cualquier fuerza invasora nipona.
In 1941, one of my classmates was George Murakami, and his little brother Roy was at the school. When we did the school play, I played Thomas Jefferson, and George Murakami played George Washington. And we wore the white wigs and did the patriotic speeches. And 2 weeks later, George Murakami and Roy were taken off to the camp for the Japanese.
Unos 120,000 japoneses fueron sacados de sus hogares y negocios y enviados por tren a 10 campos de internado en todo el país.
Everybody was beginning to settle down on the train, and all of a sudden I saw my dad, and he is a very unemotional man, a gentleman, but I saw him take out this hanky and go like this, and it just overwhelmed me, it just crushed me to think that he was taking it so hard. It was called Heart Mountain, Wyoming, and that was our camp. It had barbed wire all around, and those camps desolate, and no sign of any beauty, life, green, anything at all. It was just total absence of everything.
Uno de los pocos oficiales que objetó al internado de los japoneses en Estados Unidos fue el director del FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, quien dijo que los campos eran el resultado innecesario de la histeria de guerra.
The fact that we were going to be incarcerated in these camps is a devastating feeling.
Estas imágenes son de películas caseras tomadas por japoneses forzados a permanecer en los campos. Revelan vistas de lo que los historiadores llamaron una de las mayores violaciones de derechos humanos en la historia de Estados Unidos. Mientras los planes de defensa trabajaban 24 horas al día durante la guerra, lo mismo hacían los salones de baile.
I was in Seattle, port of embarkation. We were up to our ears in men. All of the services came through there on their way to wherever they were going. We had a great time. If they couldn't dance, we taught them. And if we didn't know their steps, they taught us. We knew those guys were on their way overseas. This was going to be maybe their last big party.
La ida de tantos hombres cambió el ritmo y el patrón de la vida social estadounidense. Para las adolescentes, eso significó a menudo crecer muy rápido.
Teenage girls were more precociously sexual in some ways in the 40s than they'd been in the 30s, in part because their young boyfriends were going off to the war and they might never see them again.
I'll be seeing you.
Un joven que no fue aceptado en las Fuerzas Armadas por un tímpano roto, comenzaría una carrera entonces que sería un fenómeno social durante medio siglo.
They were able to project some of that newfound sensuality onto this Frank Sinatra character who came emerging on the scene. He came at exactly the right moment to become such a cultural figure.
Night and day, you are the one.
He was an idol. I mean, he was my heartthrob, my swoon man, everything. I was a true Bobby Sox screamer.
Los hombres en ese momento eran menos condescendientes con Sinatra. El periódico del ejército, Stars and Stripes, decía que los ratones también hacen gritar a las mujeres. Para los muchachos jóvenes en el frente civil, todos los héroes tenían uniformes.
I remember being jealous that I didn't have an older brother. And I remember seeing these kids come to school with patches on their jackets that their brothers had sent them. And souvenirs that they had sent from overseas, and I thought, God, I felt deprived because I didn't have an older brother who would send me patches and send me souvenirs and send me a German helmet. We lived for the war movies. I mean, we fought that war in the East End Theater and the Plaza Theater and the Lakewood Theater.
We go to Saturday serials, and at that time, there were a lot of war movies, like Wake Island.
On December 7th, they struck by the thousands from land, from the sea.
Anything from So Proudly We Hail to The Purple Heart to Operation Burma.
You get fired up in the movies. I remember once during a movie called Bataan, we were losing badly. I think Robert Taylor was trying to hold the Japanese back and couldn't. And Lefty Brosnan, one of the kids in the neighborhood, stood up and threw a golf ball at the screen to try to stem the Japanese onslaught. And all he did was mess up the screen for the rest of the war because it had a big patch in it that you could always see there, you know, and that was Lefty's patch. We played war constantly. We made our own rifles out of wooden boards. We made machine guns out of fence posts, cutting down the enemy. But we had no concept, absolutely none, nor did most of our parents, absolutely how brutal it was.
Las familias en el Frente Civil no recibían la verdad en las cartas que los soldados enviaban a casa.
What they were doing was assuring their people that they were okay, not in any danger, usually an intense lie, that we were going to win the war very soon, and please send another pair of dry socks, and things like that. I mean, nobody ever told the truth. You know, I'm sick to death of this. I think I'm going to have a breakdown. I think I'm going to go mad. You didn't say that kind of thing, because it would have bothered the recipient.
Los soldados estadounidenses peleaban y morían en 3 continentes. Habían habido batallas victoriosas pero costosas en el Pacífico, Noráfrica e Italia. Para finales de 1943, las bajas de Estados Unidos habían rebasado los 100,000 hombres.
People with fathers or brothers or sons in combat were always conscious that someday that knock on the door and the Western Union man would be there with a telegram, you know, with the bad news.
Every time the doorbell rang and I didn't know anybody was coming, you were sitting there, is this my telegram, you know? And finally it came. We just couldn't believe it. They were coming back from Berlin. As they were getting closer to England, they got near Benty, Germany, they were hit by flak, and they shot the plane down. Officers had to wait to jump before the other fellows jumped out. So he was about one of the last ones out. He jumped and his parachute never opened. He was too close to the ground. Out of 10 men, 3 of them came back. My whole world ended. He was a pilot. We're proud of him. I still am.
Esto se hacía cada vez más común en el Frente Civil. Las estrellas de oro colocadas en las ventanas de las familias que habían perdido a un ser amado.
The realization that this was not fun anymore came to us when the kids from the neighborhood started dying in the war. 2 brothers of 2 of my classmates died in that war, and Jack Callahan being one, and Jimmy Warkomsky being the other. It was a small neighborhood and it was a small parish. So then I found myself being thankful that I didn't have a brother who was at risk, who, you know, that I wouldn't have to sit with my mother while she wept in church while they played taps and folded the flag and gave it to her.
Al aumentar el número de muertes, también lo hizo la resolución estadounidense. Con el conflicto entrando ahora en su tercer año, el Frente Civil estaba ansioso por una batalla decisiva. Una que acabara con la guerra y detuviera las muertes. Para la primavera de 1944, el Frente Civil estaba obsesionado con el lugar y la fecha en la que se produciría la batalla decisiva de la guerra.
I remember my great uncles, and they all were wheat farmers. There were 10 of them. And I remember them all coming and being around literally the apple barrel and eating pickles and having toothpicks and having a map of the war and figuring what the next move is going to be. Those were big meetings.
El siguiente movimiento, bajo la dirección del general Dwight David Eisenhower, sería la operación militar más grande de la historia norteamericana. Cientos de barcos y miles de aviones producidos en el Frente Civil norteamericano transportarían tropas estadounidenses y aliadas a través del Canal Inglés hasta las playas francesas de Normandía. La invasión que el mundo había estado esperando comenzó al alba del 6 de junio de 1944. Fue llamado Día D, y fue un riesgo tremendo que, aunque tuviese éxito, tendría un enorme costo en vidas.
Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor. Lead them straight and true.
It was a wonderful moment of national unity when Franklin Roosevelt read a prayer that had been printed in the afternoon editions of the newspapers so people could pray along with him. The impulse to pray was just overwhelming. The churches were filled from sea to shining sea, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. The church bells clanged and the people were in the pews praying. Oh, it was a very big event. The country had pulled itself together to make this invasion possible. And it was the great achievement of the American Republic in the first half of the 20th century, the D-Day invasion, and it was treated as such here in this country.
Blasting big headlines. Second Front, D-Day, invasion. It meant we were now invaded the European continent, and it was the beginning of the end.
Y ciertamente lo fue. Los aliados ahora peleaban en Francia, y en solo 2 meses, París sería liberada. Con el ánimo nacional en alto, Roosevelt, quien ya había ganado un tercer periodo sin precedentes, comenzó a hacer campaña para un cuarto periodo.
I don't want to exaggerate the amount that we depended upon Roosevelt, but from a child's point of view, he was very much a part of the celestial furniture. There was God at the top level and then Roosevelt.
Las próximas elecciones distrajeron temporalmente a los estadounidenses de los sucesos en el extranjero. Los oponentes republicanos esparcieron rumores de la precaria salud de Roosevelt. Pero cuando contestó a los cargos de que había enviado un crucero de la Marina a buscar a su perro, Roosevelt parecía estar en su mejor forma.
These Republican leaders have not been content with attacks on me, or on my wife, or on my sons. No, not content with that. They now include my little dog, Fallon.
People in the know, of course, knew how sick he was, and I suppose anybody with eyes could have seen in the last campaign that this was a very unhealthy man, but Roosevelt had broken so many laws in a way already of limits, of human limits, that the idea that he would actually die was fairly shocking.
El golpe llegó el 12 de abril de 1945. mientras Roosevelt posaba para este retrato en su casa de Warm Springs, Georgia.
It was a real sad day. I've seen guys men just break down in tears right at the machine when the news came in the plant that he had died.
You could see the impact that his life had made on the American people when that famous train ride took place from Warm Springs, Georgia to Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands of people came out just to watch his body go by on the train, simply as a tribute to the fact that this man had been their leader through the two greatest crises of their lives, the Depression and then the war itself.
That was the most mournful period that I'd ever seen. No hero that I knew of in America, I think, touched Americans so much. I mean, I saw my mother crying, my father was weeping. It was a tragedy for everybody.
When Franklin Roosevelt died, it was as if the presidency had died because we had never known another president. He'd been president all my life and just assumed he would always be president. It was shattering.
Of course, I was very sorry when he died, but I didn't burst into tears. It didn't bother me as much as it bothered some people who didn't exist in an atmosphere of death as I did. For me, the war was about death. And hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, important and unimportant, were being killed all the time. He was just another casualty to me.
El peso y las responsabilidades de la presidencia cayeron en Harry Truman, quien había sido vicepresidente durante solo 82 días. Para los sorprendidos y confundidos estadounidenses que veían a Roosevelt como un padre, el nuevo presidente parecía como un tío lejano.
I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day.
Truman tuvo la oportunidad de inspirar confianza cuando menos de un mes luego de la muerte de Roosevelt anunció la rendición de Alemania.
Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East.
Una serie de valientes victorias estadounidenses parecían prometer que el final por fin llegaría.
Japan knew Japan was defeated, and we knew Japan was defeated. The question was, would they surrender? And the Japanese did not surrender. And the closer we got to the mainland islands of Japan, the higher the price became in blood.
Los ataques suicidas de los kamikazes japoneses sugirieron a los estadounidenses que el enemigo lucharía hasta el final. En julio de 1945, los aliados se reunieron en Potsdam y enviaron un ultimátum a Japón: rendición incondicional o destrucción absoluta. Mientras hablaban, millones de soldados se reunían para el último asalto al territorio japonés.
I was in deep despair and regarded myself on, say, August 1st, 1945. I regarded myself as dead already. I knew I was going to be killed.
Paul Fussell, quien había sido herido en Europa y curado para pelear otra vez, fue uno de millones de estadounidenses que se preparaban para atacar Japón.
I knew that I would be running up the beach at Kyushu. It was all planned. My division was to be in the first wave. I couldn't avoid being killed forever.
Mientras las tropas en el Pacífico esperaban la orden, un bombardero llamado Enola Gay despegó de la isla de Tinjan. El presidente Truman esperaba que su misión terminara con la guerra. El avión llevaba una nueva arma, resultado del proyecto de defensa más secreto del Frente Civil. Durante 4 años, 160.000 personas habían trabajado en 37 lugares, la mayoría de ellos sin saber la magnitud de lo que estaban haciendo. El 12 de julio, el arma fue probada. La decisión de usarla llegó menos de un mes después.
It was a decision made by people who also did not understand the magnitude of what they had. Who could? We were at war, and we were fighting an enemy who had not shown any inclination toward mercy whatsoever. And we wanted the killing to stop. Truman said, I dropped the bomb, I made the decision to stop the war.
El 6 de agosto, la misión del Enola Gay era arrojar la nueva bomba sobre la ciudad japonesa de Hiroshima.
I remember hearing on the radio that an atom bomb had been dropped. And in my head, I spelled it A-D-A-M and wondered, what is this atom bomb? And, why is it so powerful?
El mundo nunca había visto algo semejante. Una sola bomba que podía borrar del mapa una ciudad entera. 3 días después, una segunda bomba atómica fue arrojada sobre Nagasaki. La casi inconcebible idea de una rendición japonesa ahora estaba al alcance de los aliados. Las noticias llegaron el 15 de agosto de 1945. Japón se había rendido.
I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Thrilled that the war was over, that I didn't have to fight. They were going to send me to machine gun school, but there was nobody to machine gun anymore.
It was awesome. It was crazy. Everyone was screaming and laughing and yelling, and it was wonderful. War was over. Done. Finished. We won.
We were so happy. I had to retire to my little tent, close the curtain, and just sit there and cry for several hours. Very powerful emotional feeling to be redeemed from certain death into life again.
I was glad it was over. I didn't go downtown or anything like that. For me, it was over a long time ago, right?
$292,000 estadounidenses pagaron por la victoria de la democracia con sus vidas. Los 11 millones de veteranos que regresaron llegaron a un país que al parecer no había sido tocado por la guerra, excepto por una cosa: la inocencia e ingenuidad habían desaparecido.
The day that the Japanese surrendered, I remember going next to our next-door neighbors, Mrs. Lucido, and I said, Mrs. Lucido, the war's over, the Japanese have surrendered. And she threw open the kitchen window and said, yeah, the next one will be with Russia. Closed the window, and that was the conversation.
En la dulce celebración de la victoria, pocos se imaginarían que la paz duraría muy poco. Los veteranos que regresaban y sus familias forjarían una prosperidad que en realidad el mundo nunca había visto. Eso lo veremos en un próximo episodio en The Century, America's Time. Soy Peter Jennings, hasta la próxima.